There was a commotion in the royal chambers during the night. Guards burst into the stepdaughter's room and found a guardsman there, trembling and with tangled cords on his clothes. The girl sat on the edge of the bed, her hair disheveled, her eyes brown and empty. One of the guards shouted, "I caught him by the hand. Who brought him here?" The guardsman raised his hands but only stared silently at the door. The queen stood in the doorway. She did not cry out. She stood without looking away, her face unmoved. The guards became animated, but she raised her hand and the commotion subsided. "Take him away," the queen said quietly to the guard. He grabbed the guard. The girl suddenly jumped up and rushed to the door, grabbing the queen by the sleeve. "Mother, don't send him away." The queen pulled her arm away. Someone in the royal family might hear. Someone would surely report it to the king. The queen looked at her stepdaughter and said evenly, "Do you know what the truth is?" The girl did not answer, only looked as if she were waiting for punishment. The guardsman stood still, and the queen took a step forward and looked at him. He was young, not particularly tall, with a face that did not hide his feelings. "What is your name?" asked the queen. "Ivan," he said. "Will you tell the truth?" "I am ready," he replied. "Why are you here?" "I love her," he said, "and it seemed to me that if I left, she would die alone." The queen listened silently. Then she turned to her stepdaughter. "Why are you so afraid to tell me?" "Because you will kill him," the girl replied simply. The queen did not laugh or get angry. She entered the room, approached the bed, sat down on the edge, and placed her hand on the hem of her stepdaughter's dress. "If he is your lover," said the queen, "then he must answer to me. But I do not want revenge. I want to know one thing. Is he faithful to only one person, or does his heart change easily?" The stepdaughter pulled her hand away. "I don't know, mother. I just can't live without him," she said quietly. That night, the queen did not send a guard to the prison. She demanded that the doors be closed. The guards remained at the entrance, but the queen herself asked that no one rush her into a decision. She led Ivan into a small room next door and bolted the door. Her stepdaughter fell onto the bed and fell asleep, or perhaps pretended to. The queen looked at the sleeping girl, then at the door behind which she could hear the footsteps of the guards and the whispers of palace gossip. Her face showed no relief. She knew this was only the beginning. The next day, the queen invited Ivan to her morning reception, officially at court. People whispered as he walked through the hall. No one dared to look the queen in the eye, but everyone saw how she held his gaze and smiled the way a person with a plan smiles. "Ivan," she said quietly later, when everyone had left, "you have been serving as a guard for 3 years. Are you honest on the battlefield? Were you standing at the entrance to my bedroom when I gave birth? Did you swear to keep the secrets of the crown when you entered service?" He nodded. "Yes, your majesty." "I have heard that you love my stepdaughter," said the queen. "Is that true?" "Yes," he replied. "Do you love her enough to walk through fire for her?" "Yes," he said. "And if I tell you that you must choose between the queen and my stepdaughter, whom will you choose?" He was silent. "I will choose the one who needs me," he finally said. The queen showed no emotion. She simply placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "Very well. I have another test for you." And this test began gently. The queen's attention to Ivan was not an authoritative demand, but an invitation. She watched him during the day, asking questions about his service and his family. At this time, her stepdaughter looked either frightened or rebellious. Alone with the queen, Ivan felt that he had fallen into a trap. She invited him to conversations where she talked about duty and honor, and then about simple things. His favorite food, his injuries, the nights when he was afraid. He opened up to her in a different way than he did to his stepdaughter. With her, he was bold and simple. In front of the queen, he tried to be honest and attentive. One evening, the queen stayed alone with him longer than she should have. She spoke calmly, asking about battles, about how dying is not scary if you have something to die for. He listened and answered briefly. Then she got up, walked to the window and said, "No one really leaves us. But sometimes people choose not what they want, but what they are afraid of losing." He looked at her and saw more than just curiosity in her eyes. He saw the queen's loneliness. He saw a person who had played a role for many years and now wanted to understand who she would be without that role. He didn't know what to say. "I don't want to betray you," he muttered. "I'm not asking for betrayal," said the queen. "I'm asking for the truth and an answer to a simple question. If I offered you something that could decide your fate, what would you do?" He understood the hint. He didn't answer. The queen nodded and summoned her stepdaughter that same evening. She pretended to judge her, but did not. Instead, the queen spoke to the girl as if seeking an ally. "I want to know how much he is yours. I don't want to take him away, but I want to understand how steadfast he is." The stepdaughter sobbed and said, "I won't understand if you take him away." "I won't take him away," said the queen. From that day on, the three of them began to weave their fabric of deception and sincerity. They met at different times. The stepdaughter quietly in the garden by the fountain, the queen in the cold reception room, Ivan alone at the gate. The queen gave him signs, allowing Ivan to feel important. The stepdaughter was jealous, but she also longed for the feeling of being loved by the whole court. Ivan was caught between them. He felt a growing sense of guilt, but also a growing sense of delight. After all, no one looked at him the way they did. They said, "I love you. Don't leave me. You are mine. We mustn't do this." They argued, begged, were silent, and cried. The queen recorded their answers in her mind, her quiet checks turning into more personal suggestions. "If you love her, be there when she needs you. If you love me, be honest with me." He tried to be honest while remaining who he was. Rumors were already circulating within the royal walls, but no one could prove anything. Everyone in this relationship thought they were acting out of love. Everyone was preparing for the moment when the truth would come out. At night, after the queen closed the door behind Ivan, they began to meet more often. Not secretly, but quietly. The queen invited him to her reception room, poured him a cup of wine, asked him about his injuries, his mother and brothers, and then asked him to stay. He sat opposite her and looked at her as if he was afraid to tear off her mask, but couldn't leave. She spoke calmly, almost like a person seeking company rather than power. "Are you tired?" she asked once, looking at his hands. He looked away. "Sometimes," he replied. "Sit down," the queen ordered. "Tell me about your last campaign." He told her, and there was little pride in his voice. "I look at you and I don't understand why you remain in service," she said. "You can leave, get married, live." He smiled sadly. "Who needs me?" he said. "I'm just a guardsman, nothing more." The queen listened. "You are needed by those who look at you like that," she said, "and by those who want you to be near them." She didn't say me, but he understood. He tried to leave but couldn't. She gave him small gifts, a cloak for the winter, a ring with a simple stone, a word of trust. He took it as a promise of protection. His stepdaughter saw the changes. She would come to the queen with requests and leave looking like someone who had been abandoned. Once she approached Ivan in the kitchen and said bluntly, "You've changed. You come to me, and then you leave with her." He was silent. "I love you," she said, and there was a command in her voice, not a request. He lowered his eyes. "I love you," he repeated, but it sounded weaker. The stepdaughter once entered the reception room and found the queen sitting with Ivan. They were talking, and the queen suddenly stood up and approached the stepdaughter. "Are you jealous?" she asked. The girl looked back, tears welling up in her eyes. "Of course," she replied. The queen took her by the shoulders, looked into her eyes and said quietly, "If you love him, protect him. If you are afraid, leave." The girl pushed her hand away. "Don't tell me what to do," she whispered and left. After that, there was an undeniable coldness between the queen and her stepdaughter. But at court, people did not notice it right away. They saw only what they were shown. The queen was reserved and friendly, her stepdaughter was quiet and pale, and Ivan was composed. A few minor rumors began to circulate. Someone had seen a guardsman late at night near the South Tower. Someone had heard a woman's laughter in the chambers, where it was usually quiet. A private place in the kingdom is a place of power, and the rumors multiplied. A month after these meetings began, the queen summoned Ivan to her alone and said, "I cannot keep this hidden forever. If anyone finds out that there is a connection between us, I will lose everything. My throne, my voice, my respect. I want you to give me your word." He was silent but then said, "I will." "Then swear to me that you will not tell anyone, that you will not leave." and that you will not speak out against me if the king asks." He bowed his head and nodded. "I swear." This oath became invisible armor for the queen and a heavy burden for him. He felt that he was choosing not his own future, but their peace of mind. He tried to keep both worlds. He came to his stepdaughter, held her hand, told her he loved her, kissed her and promised marriage. But when he returned to the queen's chambers, he said something else. He promised to be there, to serve quietly, to be her stronghold. Inside he was torn. One night, his stepdaughter entered his room without knocking and found him sitting at the table with a letter. He grabbed the letter and wanted to hide it, but she managed to see the seal. "Whose mark is this?" she asked. He looked away and said, "No one. It's nothing." "You're lying," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought you were honest with me." He stood up. "I am honest with you," he said. "But there are some things that cannot be revealed." She came closer and grabbed him by the shirt. "If you leave, I'll tell the king that you stole my ring," she whispered. He laughed dryly. "You'll do worse than that," he said. "You'll say that I'm her lover. You'll say I betrayed the crown." She moved away, and in her eyes there was not only fear, but also an understanding of the danger. Meanwhile, the king began to notice small changes. He saw how the queen summoned Ivan more often than others. He saw how his stepdaughter walked with her head bowed. He did not see what was between them, but his intuition as a ruler sensed a change. He asked the queen, "Are you busy with something? You look tired." She smiled and said that she was thinking a lot about the country. He believed her because she knew how to tell the truth in half-truths. But strange things bothered him. One of the guards came to the king and said that he had seen Ivan at night by the western wall, where servants were never supposed to be. Another rumor reached him that his stepdaughter often did not show up for breakfast. These little things added up to a picture of disorder in the royal household. The king began to observe more closely. He began to send people to ask questions and see who the letters were from. He did not say anything explicitly, but he took steps. He increased security, ordered the court reporters to be on guard, and instructed the queen's personal servant to check her chambers. It was a subtle torture for the queen. She understood that if the king began to watch more closely, her game would be over. She began to think about how to secure her position, not only with a secret passion, but with real steps that could not be undone. She invited Ivan to her room and said, "I will give you a name that no one will forget. I will make sure that you will not need anyone's mercy." He looked at her apprehensively. "How?" he asked. She took his hand and said bluntly, "I can give you a place in my bedchamber guard. I can announce that you have become my husband in custom, if necessary. You won't have to hide." He was silent. He thought about his stepdaughter, about her hands, about her voice. "If you do that," he said, "you will break her heart." "I don't want to break it," replied the queen. "I want people to be unable to touch you. If you stay with me, no one will come near you." He listened and understood that her proposal was not only protection, but also a step that would lead to unhappiness. He felt cornered. That same night, his stepdaughter came to the queen. She stood in the doorway, her voice clear. "She is making him an offer. She wants to take him away from me. Tell me what I should do." The queen looked at her and said quietly, "I want you to tell the truth. Do you want him for yourself, or do you want him to be yours alone?" The girl cried, "I want him forever." The queen nodded. "Then fight. But don't fight with weapons. Fight so that the king doesn't witness it." The stepdaughter left and met Ivan late in the evening in the kitchen. They stood close together, spoke little, kissed, and held hands. He promised that nothing would separate them. She believed him. They did not know that soon everything would change. The rumors would grow louder, the king would start asking direct questions, and a man would appear in the kingdom who had both the desire and the means to destroy them. Ivan held his stepdaughter's hand in the kitchen, and they stood in silence. She looked at him as if trying to wring a promise from his heart. He squeezed her hand and said quietly, "I am with you. I will not leave." She allowed herself to believe him, even though her mind told her otherwise. The next morning, the queen woke up feeling nauseous. At first, she didn't understand what it meant. She thought she was tired, that it was because of the wine, but the feeling in her chest wouldn't go away. She got up, looked at her reflection in the mirror, and noticed that her dress was tighter. She took off her belt and felt a slight pain. She dropped her hand, covered her face, and quietly told herself that it was impossible. She knew that such a thought would destroy her peace on the throne. She knew that pregnancy was a public matter. She could not show weakness. Her stepdaughter also began to sit and stare out the window frequently. She was pale and began vomiting in the mornings. She thought it was an illness. She didn't dare tell Ivan. He noticed that she was stretching less, that her eyes often closed, but she said she was tired. "If you're sick, you'll tell me," he said. She nodded and went into her room, closing the door. Ivan began to notice changes in the queen as well. She refused wine, asked for soft food, and tolerated smells worse than before. At first, he thought it was fatigue, but then he saw how the queen tightened her corset to hide her stomach. She knew how to hide everything, and that bothered him. A week later, the queen summoned her old midwife, a woman she had trusted for many years. The midwife entered, bowed, and saw the queen standing in her nightgown, her face white. "Your Majesty," said the midwife. "What is the matter? You are not sleeping." The queen silently pulled her nightgown down just below her shoulder, and the midwife, without asking any unnecessary questions, ran her hand over her stomach. She did not say anything at first. Then she whispered quietly, "You are with child." The queen closed her eyes and nodded. She said nothing, only looked at the old woman and said evenly, "Tell no one." Thus began the secret. The queen rearranged her schedule. The nights became short, the receptions rare. She looked after the house, but now her attention was divided. She thought about the child and who the father would be. The thought that the father was the guard returned and would not leave her. She knew the price of such a thought. She knew that if the king found out, there would be war, not on the battlefield, but in the house. The stepdaughter came to the midwife later, alone, without a word. She took off her apron, sat down on a chair and looked at the woman. "Me too," she said. The midwife looked at her and took her hand. "Who is the father?" she whispered. The girl covered her face with her hands and cried. "Him," she muttered. The midwife sat down next to her and put her hand on her shoulder. "You can't tell both of them the same thing," she said, breathing heavily. "I understand," whispered the girl. Both women knew that their situations had become the same, and at the same time incompatible. They both kept their secrets and fears to themselves. They both understood that if the king found out, he would choose the throne. If the people found out, it would be a disgrace to the house. If Ivan told anyone, his life would be ruined. Ivan did not know at first. He saw that his stepdaughter was pale and that the queen was cold, but he could not see through their masks. He tried to be there for both of them as best he could. He brought his stepdaughter food when she could not eat, and stayed with the queen at night when she was unwell. He told himself he was doing it for protection. He told himself it would be easier to get through everything that way. But one day he overheard a conversation between the queen and the midwife. He arrived at the court late and saw the midwife leaving the queen's reception room. He walked past her and heard her footsteps. She paused and looked towards the queen's chambers, sobbed, and left. Ivan stopped. Something about her behavior seemed strange to him. He approached, found the midwife at the well, and asked directly, "Madam, what happened?" She looked at him and then lowered her eyes. "Everything is fine," she said, but her lips were trembling. He was filled with questions, but left silently. Gradually, the rumors grew louder. One of the valets, Fyodor, a man with an envious face, noticed that the queen looked different. He was famous for seeing what others missed. He saw the stepdaughter leaving Ivan's reception room with her head covered in a scarf. He heard one of the maids whisper, "She's pregnant." He recorded everything in his mind, and his heart filled with greed. With such knowledge, he could play games. Fyodor went to the chief guard and said, "I saw Ivan going to the queen's chambers in the evening. I saw his stepdaughter with him in the kitchen. I'm afraid this is not good." The guard shrugged. "We are watching, but we need proof." Fyodor was not satisfied. He found the king's servant and told him the same thing, adding that such a matter could not be kept silent. The servant went to the king. When the rumor reached the king's ears, he did not immediately fly into a rage. He listened carefully, his face expressionless. He asked, "Did you see it yourself?" The servant nodded. The king remained silent. It was not immediately clear from his eyes what he was thinking. He knew people better than most. He knew how dangerous rumors could be. But he also knew that if he did not investigate, the rumors would spread. He ordered, "Watch them. I want to know the truth myself." The servant bowed and left. The king did not want to judge immediately. He began to set up a network of surveillance. He said nothing to the queen, but sent an old knight to her with orders to be in her chambers more often. He ordered an increase in the guard at his stepdaughter's chambers, and began to stay longer in his own halls. He appeared calm, but deep down he was determined. The queen felt the air around her tightening. She knew she would not last long. She knew that people did not need much evidence. Rumors and small coincidences were enough. She sat in the evening and spoke quietly to the midwife. "What should I do? If the king asks, what will I say?" The midwife put her hand on her knee and said, "You are a mother. You will decide what is more important, the child or the throne." The queen looked up and said, "I don't know." She covered her face with her hand and cried for the first time since becoming queen. Meanwhile, her stepdaughter remained in her room and prayed as best she could. She prayed not to preserve her love, but not to lose Ivan's life. If they take him, she thought, I will die. She refused to think of herself for the sake of the throne. Only one thing mattered to her, him. She wrote his name on her palm, and fell asleep with her face buried in her pillow. In the evening, an old friend from the guard approached Ivan and said bluntly, "They are asking about you. Be careful." Ivan felt the ground slip away from under his feet. He did not know who had informed on him. He thought about his stepdaughter and the queen and realized that no lie would help now. He locked himself in his room and thought about what he had said to the queen, about how he had sworn. He thought about how he had loved two women at once and didn't want to deceive anyone, but now he himself had become the keeper of a secret that could tear everyone apart. The night before the king decided to act was dark. All three slept poorly. The king was going hunting the next day, and he would take people with him who would see and learn everything. Ivan lay with his eyes closed and thought that his life was over. His stepdaughter tore at her hair and whispered his name. The queen wrote letters and then threw them into the fire because she did not know who she could trust. In the morning, dawn brought more than just the sun. It brought rumors that the king was sending people from the court on a hunt, and was waiting to see who would be late. And on that day in the courtyard, when the people stood and began to disperse to their places, a chain of events began that no one could stop. The king went hunting, but in reality he went to see how the courtiers would behave in his absence. He understood that if nothing happened, the rumors would die down on their own. If someone showed off, it would be proof. He sent away the men he considered loyal and took a few trusted people with him. In the morning, the courtyard looked as usual. People were arguing, cooking, and some were joking. But the king's eyes were looking for any unfamiliar movements. When the hunt began, the king left several guards at the gate and ordered them not to let anyone in without his permission. He wanted to see who would come and what they would say. He did not believe in quick confessions. He wanted to see the reaction of those who were suspected. He knew that people were prone to fearing judgment, but sometimes fear caused them to make mistakes. At that time, there was tension in the queen's chambers. She sat alone, letter in hand, staring at the seal as if trying to read the answer there. The midwife left and said she would come every day. The queen looked at the window. She knew it would soon be visible. She got up and went to the king's chamber. She entered the hall where the king received ambassadors and approached quietly. "Sire," she said softly, "I want to speak with you alone." The king was calm. He looked up. "Speak," he said. She moved closer and lowered her voice. "I hear rumors. I am not asking for mercy. I am asking for time." The king looked at her and smiled slowly without emotion. "Time is given to all who do not hide the truth," he replied. "What will you say when they ask?" She fell silent. "I will tell the truth," she whispered. The king nodded and stood up. "Then let the people decide what is true," he said. He pretended to return to the reception, but in his mind, everything had already been decided. He sent a message around the court. "There will be a meeting in the hall tonight. Everyone will come, and those who are concerned will come too." The king did not begin to spread the order loudly, but the court gradually found out. Ivan was the first to hear about the order. He was sitting at the table eating bread when one of the guards came and said quietly, "His Majesty orders you to appear in the hall this evening." He felt his heart beat faster. He went to his stepdaughter and saw that she was crying. "What's wrong?" he asked. "The sovereign is gathering people," she said. "I don't want to go." He took her by the hand and said, "We will go together." She shook her head, but got up and got ready, because she could not leave him. When evening came, the hall was full. People whispered, some laughed, some were silent. The king entered slowly, placed his hand on the table, and looked at the assembled crowd. "I have heard rumors," he said. "I want to know the truth. And if any of you know anything important, speak now." Then Fyodor, the one who had been gathering rumors, stepped forward. His face was pale, but he spoke confidently. "I have seen it. I saw one of the guards going to the queen's chambers at night. I saw that the stepdaughter often disappears. I consider this a disgrace to the house." The hall grew noisy. The queen rose and approached the podium. "Who are you to accuse?" she asked quietly. Fyodor did not back down. "I am a servant of the court," he said. "If it does not concern Her Majesty, then I am mistaken. But I did not lie." The king stood up and ordered Ivan to be brought in. The guards approached and let him out. He stood in the doorway with his head bowed, in full view of everyone. The stepdaughter sniffed softly and clenched her fists. The queen clasped her hand tightly on the hem of her dress, but her face remained impassive. "Ivan," said the king, "are you responsible for what they say? Were you in my wife's chambers last night?" He looked sternly. Ivan looked up and saw that the king was not looking at him, but at the queen. "I was on duty there, sire," he replied quietly. "I was in the chambers." He did not immediately admit what had happened between them. He only stated the fact. "Why?" asked the king. Ivan remained silent, searching the queen's eyes for at least a hint. The queen took a step forward and said, "The one who said that is lying. He wants to destroy the house." Her voice was cold and quiet. "Then let's ask directly. Who is conceived under my roof now?" said the king. There was a murmur and whispering in the hall. The queen barely restrained herself. She felt that much was at stake now. The stepdaughter rose from her seat and approached the king. She looked him straight in the eye and said quietly, "I will tell the truth, if you promise not to harm him." The king looked at her and said, "Speak." She took a deep breath and said, "I am pregnant, and the father is Ivan." The hall sighed, and some turned away. The king froze for a moment, then asked, "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. I love him." The king looked at the queen. He saw only fatigue in her face. She approached him, placed her hand on the table, leaned forward slightly and said, "If you want to maintain order, I will tell my truth too. But on one condition, if you spare the one who is here." He looked at her suspiciously. "Do you want me to pardon the guard?" he asked. She remained silent. Finally, she said, "I will tell you, I am pregnant." The hall grew even more noisy. The king did not expect this. "You are pregnant?" he asked, as if trying to understand if this was a game. She nodded. "Yes, me too." His eyes narrowed. He came closer, looked at her stomach, then looked at his stepdaughter. "Two pregnant women?" he asked. "And one father?" The queen put her hand on her heart and said quietly, "I am not begging for mercy. I ask that you listen. I will accept any sentence, but first listen." She fell silent, unable to appear strong. "I love people in different ways. If I have caused you pain, I will accept any punishment. But I do not want the man who was my protector to die for a lie." She looked at Ivan. He closed his eyes. The king was silent. He understood that if he sentenced Ivan, one of the two women would lose everything, and the other would not regain the throne. If he pardoned him, the throne might lose respect. He wanted to do the right thing. He ordered, "Ivan, you will be questioned. Tell the truth. Who is the father of the children? Your life and freedom depend on the truth." Ivan stood up, his shoulders trembling. He looked first at his stepdaughter, then at the queen, and finally said, "I love both of them. But I don't know how you want to hear it. I was with both of them. I hid it. I am ashamed." The hall fell silent. The king grabbed a glass and slammed it on the table, so that the sound echoed throughout the hall. Are you admitting that you were with the queen and your stepdaughter at the same time? He asked. Yes, replied Ivan. His voice trembled, but it was honest. I didn't mean any harm. I only wanted love. The king quickly ordered the guards to take Ivan to prison. He said quietly only to the queen, "Did you know?" The queen nodded. "I knew and didn't say anything," she replied. His face hardened. He paused, then said loudly, "The queen will be questioned tomorrow. My stepdaughter will remain in my room until the matter is clarified. No one will leave the court." People discussed the matter loudly, some cried. The stepdaughter fell to her knees and grabbed the queen's skirt. "Save him," she begged. The queen lifted her up, hugged her, and said, "Hush. I'll try." Ivan thought differently in prison. He thought he was guilty, but he didn't understand what exactly he had given away. He heard screams as the guards led him away. He thought about the children he might never see again. He thought about the ones he loved and who loved him. He thought about the queen and his stepdaughter, and his chest felt empty, as if someone had taken his heart out. It was a long night for everyone. The king did not sleep. He thought about laws and honor, about what he would say to the king of the neighboring state if the rumors spread. He thought about how the throne was held by the trust of the people. He wrote orders to question the queen, to watch the house, to keep the underground under control. He knew that tomorrow everything would change. In the morning, the queen asked the midwife, "If the child is mine and hers, what does that mean?" The midwife replied, "It means that the truth must be hidden or told, depending on what you want. The truth is difficult to keep together, especially when power stands behind it." The queen was silent. Her face was tired, but she said firmly, "I will tell everything. I will not give him up to death. I will give everything if I have to." The stepdaughter lay on the floor of the royal chamber and wept. "I'm afraid," she confessed, pressing her face into her palm. The queen got up and sat down next to her, taking her hand. "We will be together," she said simply. The stepdaughter nodded, trying to believe it. The queen's interrogation began the next day in the small hall, in the presence of several knights. The king sat with the air of a judge. The queen entered the hall calmly. She looked at the king and said, "I will tell the truth, sire. I will tell you everything. But I ask one thing. Do not kill him before you hear it." His face was merciless. "Speak," he said. She began to speak calmly, without excuses. She told how she once saw in him not only a warrior, but a human being. How he helped her on the night of her infertility. How kind he was. She spoke of how love does not choose. There was no excuse in her words, only truth. When she finished, the king looked at her and said, "Your truth does not remove the violations of the law. You are my wife. Your actions are the actions of a queen, and they affect the throne. Do you understand that?" She nodded. "I understand," she said. Then the king asked for Ivan to be brought in. He was brought in. He stood in his riding coat. The king asked again, "You say you loved us both?" "Why?" Ivan replied simply, "Because they made my life brighter. I didn't think about the law. I thought about warmth." The king stood up and said, "You have broken your oath of allegiance to the crown and the house. For this you will be punished." He took the place of a knight and pronounced the sentence. "For treason and for bringing chaos to the court, you will be imprisoned for many years." It was milder than it could have been. Ivan was sent to prison, but with a chance at life. The queen was placed under house arrest, and her stepdaughter was sent to a house far from the court, but not for execution. When people heard the sentence, some rejoiced. Some wept. No one was completely satisfied. The queen understood that she had lost much more than her freedom. She had lost trust. The stepdaughter understood that she was left without the man she loved. Ivan lay in prison and thought he was saved, but his salvation was like death. He lost his honor, his freedom, and his hope of seeing his child. Months later, the queen gave birth in seclusion. The child was hidden. The stepdaughter gave birth later, in a house far from the court. No one saw the children openly. Ivan sat in his dungeon and heard from distant female voices that the births had taken place. He thought about the little ones, about how he had never held them in his arms. The following days passed slowly. The kingdom returned to normal life, but a crack remained in the throne that was difficult to repair. The tragedy was not sudden. It was quiet and prolonged. The queen became cold, the king even more attentive to his affairs. His stepdaughter died in childbirth shortly before she was allowed to return. Ivan spent many years in prison and, upon his release, found that there was no place left for him. His love was destroyed. The queen lived for many more years, but the throne seemed empty to her, as if it had lost its meaning. Thus ended a story that could be called disastrous. Love hidden under the power led to loss of life, freedom, childhood, and trust. People talked about it for a long time, as an example of how secrets in the ruler's house become foreign treasures that no one should seek.